A tourist unleashed his bulldog on a royal guard, thinking fear would break his stance. But when the guard's hands moved, the crowd gasped. His threatening beast had met its match. Here's what happened. But before we continue, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, as tomorrow at the same time the morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Buckingham Palace as guard James Harrison maintained his post. His scarlet tunic, a striking contrast against the ancient stonework. The usual buzz of tourist conversation and camera clicks filled the air, but something else caught his attention. The deep, rumbling growl of a bulldog being held back by a taut leather leash. "Easy there, Cupcake," a man's voice carried across the courtyard, dripping with false sweetness that barely masked underlying aggression. "You'll get your chance to meet the toy soldier soon enough." Marcus Reed, a stocky man in his 40s wearing cargo shorts and a sleeveless shirt that revealed heavily tattooed arms, made his way through the crowd, his bulldog, Cupcake, strained against the leash, powerful muscles rippling beneath his brown and white coat. Several tourists instinctively stepped back, creating a small clearing around Reed and his dog. A mother hurriedly pulled her young son behind her, while an elderly couple exchanged worried glances. The bulldog's presence itself wasn't concerning. Many visitors brought their pets to the palace grounds, but there was something in Reed's bearing, a deliberate menace in the way he handled the leash, that set off warning signals. "Look at him standing there," Reed announced to no one in particular, jerking Cupcake's leash as the dog's growls intensified, all dressed up in his fancy costume, thinking he's something special. He moved closer to Harrison's position, deliberately allowing Cupcake to strain toward the guard. "What do you think, boy? Think he'll keep standing still if you give him a proper greeting?" Harrison remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with practiced discipline. 8 years of military service, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, had taught him to assess threats without betraying any reaction. He noted Reed's stance, the way he kept shortening Cupcake's leash only to let it slack again, a calculated pattern of agitation. The bulldog, despite its aggressive display, showed signs of responding to trained commands. This wasn't random mischief, it was orchestrated intimidation. "Sir," a middle-aged man in a tour group spoke up, "perhaps you should step back. The guards are active-duty military." "Shut it," Reed snapped, yanking Cupcake's leash again. "Me and Cupcake here are just saying hello, aren't we, boy?" The bulldog's growl deepened, but there was confusion in his stance now, responding to his owner's aggression while picking up on something else in Harrison's steady presence. "Unless you'd like to be his first greeting of the day?" The tour guide began quietly moving his group away, recognizing the signs of escalating trouble. But Reed had found his audience, and his voice carried louder across the courtyard. "What's wrong, soldier boy? Not so brave when faced with something that can actually bite back, are you?" Harrison maintained his position, but his training had already identified multiple concerns: the deliberate provocation, the weaponization of an animal, and the growing risk to civilians. As Reed moved even closer, Cupcake's leash now barely taut, the guard prepared himself. Years of experience told him this situation would require more than just ceremonial discipline. It would demand the perfect balance of authority and restraint. "You know what I love about Cupcake?" Reed circled closer, his voice carrying a practiced edge of menace. "He's got a real nose for weakness, don't you, boy?" He loosened the leash just enough to let the bulldog edge forward, muscular shoulders bunching with each step. "And right now, he's smelling plenty of it." A small group of school children huddled behind their teacher, wide-eyed as the scene unfolded. The teacher, a tall woman with greying hair, tried to guide them toward the palace gates, but Reed's next words froze them in place. "Don't leave just yet, kids," he called out, a cruel smile playing across his face. "Cupcake loves an audience, don't you, boy? The bulldog's growls took on a higher pitch, responding to the tension in his owner's voice, especially when someone's trying to pretend they're not scared. An elderly gentleman wearing a veteran's pin stepped forward, his weathered face set in lines of disapproval. "That's enough of this nonsense. This is a place of ceremony and respect." "Respect?" Reed barked a harsh laugh, deliberately letting Cupcake lunge forward before snapping the leash back. The bulldog's teeth flashed in the morning sun. "Tell me, old-timer, how much respect you think this dress-up soldier deserves when Cupcake here decides to test how fast he can really move?" The veteran stood his ground, though his eyes showed concern, not for himself, but for the dangerous game Reed was playing. "Son, that guard is a serving member of Her Majesty's—" "Cupcake!" Reed cut him off, his voice dropping to a command. "Show this gentleman what we think of his opinion." The bulldog's snarl deepened as Reed let the leash extend another inch. The veteran took a step back, not in fear, but in tactical retreat. His military experience told him this situation was beyond reasonable discussion. A young couple who had been filming the palace quickly pocketed their phones, sensing that recording would only escalate things. "That's right," Reed nodded with satisfaction. "Everyone wants to play hero until Cupcake gets interested. Isn't that right, boy?" He reached down to pat the bulldog's head, a gesture that should have been affectionate but came across as threatening. "Now, let's see what our fancy guard thinks about meeting a real soldier." Harrison remained motionless, but his trained eye hadn't missed a detail. He'd noted how Reed used the dog's responses to control the crowd, how each threat was carefully measured. This wasn't random aggression, it was calculated intimidation using an animal as a weapon. More concerning was how Reed kept shifting his grip on the leash, moving from proper control to deliberate agitation. "Look at him standing there," Reed's voice took on a sing-song quality that made several onlookers wince. "All stiff and proper while Cupcake here gets more and more curious." The bulldog's powerful body trembled with contained energy, responding to his owner's manipulative tone. "What do you think, boy? Should we see if he's really as brave as he's pretending to be?" A palace security officer had appeared at the edges of the crowd, speaking quietly into his radio. But Reed caught the movement, and his face darkened. "Calling for backup already? Well, Cupcake doesn't like uniforms much anyway, do you, boy?" He shortened the leash, bringing the bulldog's muscular form closer to his side. "Maybe we should show everyone here what happens when someone thinks a fancy costume makes them untouchable." The morning air grew heavy with tension as Reed's stance shifted, his intentions becoming clearer with each passing moment. The crowd had widened its circle, creating an arena-like space that would soon become a stage for confrontation. "Tell me something," Reed addressed the guard directly, positioning Cupcake just yards from Harrison's impeccably polished boots. "Behind all that ceremony, all that tradition, you're just flesh and blood, aren't you?" He let the leash extend slightly, allowing the bulldog to edge closer. "Just like everyone else who thought they could stare Cupcake down?" The guard's perfect stillness seemed to irritate Reed further. In his experience, fear had a smell, a visible tremor, a subtle tell, but Harrison's bearing remained unchanged, as solid as the palace walls behind him. Even Cupcake seemed unsure now, his aggressive stance undermined by occasional glances back at his owner, as if seeking confirmation. "You see, Cupcake here has a special talent," Reed continued, his voice taking on a darker edge. "He can smell fear through all that fancy dress-up. Can't you, boy?" He jerked the leash sharply, causing the bulldog to bark, a sound that echoed off the palace stones and sent several children pressing closer to their parents. A woman in a business suit took out her phone, presumably to call for help, but Reed's head snapped toward her immediately. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he warned, letting Cupcake turn and growl in her direction. "Cupcake gets real nervous around phones, don't you, boy? Makes him do unpredictable things." The woman slowly lowered her phone, but her other hand had found the arm of a nearby tourist, both standing their ground despite their fear. Around them, the crowd had taken on a new energy, not just concern now, but a simmering anger at this deliberate threatening of a guard who couldn't defend himself. "You know what I think?" Reed moved even closer, Cupcake's powerful body now barely 3 feet from Harrison. "I think all this," he gestured at the guard's uniform with his free hand, "is just for show, a costume to hide behind. But Cupcake, he sees through that, don't you, boy?" The Bulldog's behavior had become increasingly conflicted. While still responding to his owner's aggressive cues, something about Harrison's unwavering presence seemed to confuse him. His growls were interspersed with moments of uncertainty, his powerful head tilting slightly as if trying to reconcile the mixed signals he was receiving. "We've done this before, haven't we, Cupcake?" Reed's voice carried a note of proud cruelty. "Remember that security guard at the mall? The bouncer at that pub?" He chuckled darkly. "All tough guys, until Cupcake showed them what real power looks like. But this one," he nodded toward Harrison, "this one thinks his fancy hat and shiny buttons make him special." A palace guard sergeant had appeared at the edges of the scene, assessing the situation with professional calm. But before he could intervene, Reed's next words froze everyone in place. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," Reed announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard with deliberate menace. His fingers played with the leash clip as he spoke, the metal catching sunlight with each twist. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, not from the morning heat, but from the growing frustration at his inability to provoke a response. "In about 30 seconds, Cupcake here is going to test your dedication to standing still. And trust me," his smile turned predatory, years of using intimidation evident in every line of his face. "He's got quite the track record for making people move." The palace guard sergeant took another measured step, his own military bearing evident in his controlled approach. But Reed's response was immediate, his body language shifting to encompass both threats. "One step closer," he warned, yanking Cupcake's leash just enough to elicit a deep growl that echoed off the palace walls. "And everyone here gets to see just how fast Cupcake can run." The Bulldog's muscles bunched beneath his brown and white coat, responding to the increasing tension in the leash, though his eyes kept darting between Reed and Harrison with growing uncertainty. Harrison remained motionless, but his military training had already mapped out multiple scenarios. Through years of combat experience and specialized training, he'd noticed the subtle tells that others might miss. Cupcake's ears would flick back at certain tones in Reed's voice. Not aggression, but uncertainty, a sign of conflicted training rather than natural threat. He'd observed the dog's shifting weight patterns, the way his paws would spread and reset with each command, showing the conflict between trained responses and natural instincts. Most importantly, he'd recognized that the real threat wasn't the Bulldog, but the man holding the leash, a common situation he'd encountered during his military service with working dogs. "Time's up, soldier boy," Reed's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, his fingers now playing with the leash clip in a way that betrayed his intentions. Each movement was deliberate, calculated to maximize the tension of the moment. "Let's see how well that training holds up when Cupcake here decides to play." His fingers moved to the leash's clip, the metal catch glinting in the morning sun as his thumb found the release mechanism. "Ready or not?" The sound of the leash clip releasing echoed across the courtyard like a gunshot. "Get him, Cupcake!" Reed's command cracked through the air, vicious satisfaction written across his face as the Bulldog lunged forward. Time seemed to slow. Harrison's military training took over, his mind calculating trajectories and responses, even as his body remained perfectly still. He noted every detail, the Bulldog's powerful muscles coiling for the attack, the horrified gasps from the crowd, Reed's triumphant sneer. But most importantly, he saw what others didn't, the hesitation in Cupcake's charge, the conflict in the dog's body language. At the last possible moment, when Cupcake was mere inches from impact, Harrison moved. His motion was fluid, precise, and completely unexpected. Instead of defending or retreating, he dropped into a controlled crouch, his white-gloved hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd handled military dogs in combat zones. The crowd's terrified screams turned to gasps of amazement as Harrison caught Cupcake mid-lunge, his hands finding pressure points that combat trainers had perfected over generations. The Bulldog's momentum was redirected. His aggressive charge transformed into a controlled descent as Harrison guided him to the ground with gentle but firm authority. "Easy there, soldier!" Harrison's voice carried the calm command of a military dog handler. His hands moved with practiced precision, finding the spots that made Cupcake's aggressive posture melt away. "You're better than what he's made you do, aren't you?" Reed's triumphant expression had shattered into disbelief. "Cupcake, attack! What are you doing? Get him!" But his commands fell on deaf ears as the Bulldog responded to Harrison's touch, generations of breeding recognizing true authority and kindness. "You've been trained for this, haven't you?" Harrison continued, his voice maintaining that steady, calming tone as his hands worked. "Military bloodline. Probably from a proper breeding program before this one got hold of you." The Bulldog's tail had begun to wag, his earlier aggression completely dissolved under Harrison's expert touch. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Cupcake rolled over, exposing his belly to the guard in a complete display of submission. Harrison's white gloves moved with precision, hitting pressure points that had the powerful dog melting into a puddle of contented muscle. "No, this is impossible!" Reed's voice cracked with rage and disbelief. "Cupcake, come here! Now!" But the Bulldog merely glanced in his direction before turning back to Harrison, responding to genuine authority over learned aggression. "You see," Harrison spoke up, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard while his hands continued their skilled work. "A dog like this comes from generations of service animals, military lines bred for intelligence, loyalty, and the ability to recognize true authority." His eyes locked onto Reed's. "What you've done isn't just abuse. It's an insult to centuries of careful breeding and noble purpose." Cupcake had fully relaxed now, his powerful head resting contentedly against Harrison's leg. The transformation was complete, from threatening beast to gentle giant, under the touch of someone who understood his true nature. "These animals," Harrison continued, scratching behind Cupcake's ears in exactly the right spot, "are meant to protect, to serve, to work alongside handlers who respect their heritage, not to be turned into weapons for small men's petty displays of power." Reed had begun backing away, his face a mask of impotent rage. "You can't do this! That's my dog! Cupcake, get over here right now!" But each command only made him sound more desperate, more pathetic. The palace guard sergeant had moved in now, accompanied by 2 police officers. Their approach was careful, but they needn't have worried. Cupcake remained perfectly calm under Harrison's touch, watching his former owner's increasingly frantic commands with detached interest. "A dog like this," Harrison addressed the gathering crowd while maintaining his gentle control, "can recognize real authority. They can sense the difference between someone who leads through fear and someone who commands through respect." His hands moved to demonstrate, guiding Cupcake through basic commands that the Bulldog followed eagerly, desperate to please someone who finally spoke his language. "Let me explain something about this magnificent animal you've been abusing," Harrison addressed Reed directly, his voice carrying the weight of professional expertise. "This isn't some attack dog bred for intimidation. This is a British Bulldog, descended from lines that served alongside military and police units. Everything about him, from his muscle structure to his intelligence, was carefully developed over generations for noble purpose." Cupcake sat contentedly at Harrison's feet, his powerful body relaxed but alert, responding to subtle hand signals that the guard incorporated into his speech. The transformation was remarkable. The same dog that had been snarling minutes ago now demonstrated perfect military-grade obedience. Look at his response to proper handling, Harrison continued, his white-gloved hands guiding Cupcake through a series of precise movements. These aren't just tricks. This is inherited intelligence, bred into him by professionals who understood these animals' true potential, and you've twisted that potential into something shameful. Reed's face had turned an ugly shade of red. "He's my dog! I paid good money for—" "Money doesn't equal ownership," Harrison cut him off sharply. "Responsibility does. Care does. Understanding does. What you've done is take an animal bred for courage, loyalty, and service, and corrupted him into a tool for cheap intimidation." The police officers had moved closer, but they too seemed captivated by the lesson unfolding before them. The sergeant stood nearby, his presence adding weight to Harrison's words. "Do you see these children?" Harrison gestured to the school group that had huddled in fear earlier. "You brought an agitated animal to a public space filled with families. One mistake, one moment of lost control, and someone's child could have been seriously injured, and it wouldn't have been Cupcake's fault. It would have been yours." He ran his hand along the Bulldog's powerful shoulders, demonstrating pressure points and proper handling techniques as he spoke. "These animals are capable of incredible things when properly trained and respected. They can assist in search and rescue, provide therapy services, work alongside law enforcement. Instead, you chose to use him to threaten innocent people, to make yourself feel powerful." Cupcake's tail wagged steadily as Harrison's hands found exactly the right spots, his entire demeanor showing what the breed could be under proper guidance. The contrast between the snarling beast from earlier and this dignified animal was stark. "The real tragedy," Harrison continued, his voice taking on a tone of professional disappointment, "is that you've had this dog long enough to undo proper training. These response points, these command positions, they're all still there, bred into him over generations, but you've layered fear and aggression over natural instincts that should have been nurtured, not corrupted." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the unusual sight of a royal guard delivering an impromptu lecture while expertly handling a former attack dog. Parents who had shielded their children earlier now moved closer, letting them see how the same animal could behave under proper guidance. Every time you used him to threaten someone, every time you encouraged aggression over discipline, you weren't just breaking laws, you were betraying centuries of careful breeding and noble purpose. Harrison's hands moved with military precision, demonstrating how Cupcake responded to proper signals. This isn't just about animal abuse, though that's serious enough. It's about taking something meant for service and protection and twisting it into a weapon for your own inadequacies. Reed's attempts at bravado had completely crumbled. He stood deflated, watching as his weapon responded to Harrison's commands with eager enthusiasm, displaying the kind of intelligence and discipline that spoke of his true breeding. "A dog like this," Harrison addressed the gathered crowd while maintaining perfect control, "should be working with professionals, using his inherited abilities for proper purpose. Instead, you've used him to compensate for your own weaknesses, to threaten those you think are beneath you." His eyes locked onto Reed's. But as we can all see, proper authority doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding, respect, and the kind of discipline that this animal recognizes better than you ever could. The Bulldog's transformation under Harrison's handling had become a powerful metaphor, a living demonstration of how proper training and respect could overcome learned aggression. Children who had hidden behind their parents now watched in fascination as Cupcake performed complex commands with perfect discipline. "The authorities will decide what happens next," Harrison concluded, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. "But I want everyone here to understand something. This animal isn't dangerous by nature. What's dangerous is people who use animals to threaten others, who mistake fear for respect, who think ownership equals the right to corrupt something bred for noble purpose." His white-gloved hands moved with final demonstration of proper handling techniques. "This is what these animals are meant to be: disciplined, intelligent, capable of serving alongside those who understand their true value, not weapons for small men's attempts at intimidation. As the Animal Protection Service officers arrived on scene, their expressions shifted from concern to professional interest as they witnessed Cupcake's impeccable behavior under Harrison's guidance. The lead officer, a woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many cases of abuse, stepped forward. "Military breeding line, wouldn't you say?" she addressed Harrison, who nodded in confirmation while maintaining his subtle control over Cupcake. "Belgian-British cross, from what I can tell," Harrison replied. The response to pressure points and command positions suggests professional training before... His eyes flickered to Reed, who was now being questioned by police officers. "Before the deterioration of his training." The animal protection officer knelt beside Cupcake, her experienced hands confirming Harrison's assessment. "We'll have him evaluated properly, of course, but given what we've seen here..." She paused, watching how the Bulldog maintained perfect position even as she examined him. There are specialized programs for dogs with his breeding and initial training, service positions where his heritage can be properly honored. Reed's voice rose in protest from where the police were questioning him. "You can't take my property. I've got papers. I paid for..." Multiple witnesses reporting intentional animal abuse and public endangerment. One of the police officers cut him off, reading from his notepad. "Using an animal as a weapon in a threatening manner, disturbing the peace at a royal monument, attempting to incite an attack on a member of the Queen's Guard." The list continued, each charge wiping more colour from Reed's face. The animal protection officer had produced a proper handling lead, but before she could attach it, Harrison demonstrated one final sequence of commands. Cupcake responded perfectly, showcasing the intelligence and training that had been buried under layers of abuse. "We'll make sure he finds a proper position," she assured Harrison quietly. "There are specialized units always looking for dogs with his breeding, especially ones who can still respond to proper handling despite misuse." As Reed was led away in handcuffs, his previous bravado had completely evaporated. The same crowd he had tried to intimidate now watched in silent judgment as he was escorted to a waiting police car, his attempts at protestation falling on deaf ears. Cupcake, meanwhile, followed the animal protection officer's lead without resistance, but not before turning to offer one final look at Harrison. There was something profound in that moment. An understanding between two beings bred for service, one having helped the other remember his true nature. Harrison resumed his post with military precision, his white gloves somehow still immaculate despite the intense handling they'd just performed. The morning sun caught his brass buttons as he returned to ceremonial stance, but observers noted something else now, a deeper appreciation for the training and capability that lay beneath the ceremonial exterior. The sergeant approached briefly. "Well handled," he said quietly, "though I suspect the dog handling wasn't covered in standard guard training." 3 years with the Royal Army Veterinary Corps before joining the Guards, sir," Harrison replied, his eyes fixed forward in perfect ceremonial form. "Specialized in rehabilitation of military working dogs." The sergeant nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "Carried those skills with you, I see." "Some training never leaves you, sir." As the crowd began to disperse, parents could be heard explaining to their children not just about the Guards' ceremonial duty, but about the deeper training and capability that lay beneath the surface. The incident had revealed something important, that true authority comes not from force or fear, but from understanding, respect, and proper training. As Guard Harrison maintained his watch through the afternoon, his momentary break from ceremony had taught lessons far more valuable than any traditional display of power could convey. What would you have done in such a situation? How would you have reacted to someone using an innocent animal as a tool for intimidation? The Royal Guard's response demonstrated not just physical training, but a deeper understanding of both duty and compassion, qualities that truly define authority. Perhaps the most profound lesson came from Cupcake himself. showing how proper guidance can overcome misused potential. How do you think this reflects on our own responsibilities toward the animals in our care? What does it tell us about the difference between true authority and mere intimidation? And while we witnessed one guard's expertise in handling a dangerous situation, it raises questions about the depths of training and capability that lie beneath every ceremonial uniform. What other skills and experiences might these dedicated servicemen bring to their duties? If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think we can better protect animals from being misused while honoring their noble breeding and purpose? Don't forget to like this video if you believe in treating all beings with dignity and respect. Hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss our daily uploads of real-life lessons in courage, compassion, and proper authority. Remember, true strength isn't shown through intimidation, but through the ability to transform situations with understanding and respect.